Like to call to order the Capital Improvement Committee meeting of December 2nd at 2:05 PM. Today we have Ellie in attendance, John Furno, Ben DeCino, Gene Lovett, Matt Wojcik, and Shirley is on the line. We have 2 excused absences, which is Brandon and Kent Vincent. First item on the agenda is distribution and discussion of capital requests fiscal year 2022. Matt, would you like to take that?
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to pass around 2 different documents and go over their contents. The first is the Town of Douglas pavement management study, and I think this committee needs to see the contents of this and understand why the work was done and how we're going to utilize it. And I think, Gene, I don't have a copy for you. I need one to go, but Shirley's not here, so we do have enough for Gene. Shirley, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
It is very difficult to hear you.
How about now?
We'll see.
Can you hear me now?
There's a lot of, like, you're shuffling papers or something. It's not coming through clear. But go ahead. I'll give it a try.
Yeah, we got past that. So Matt just handed out a packet for the pavement management study. Unfortunately, you don't have a copy of that. I can get you have to get you a copy of that.
Okay.
Or in the alternative, I can go to my desk and send you an email, and John can start talking about this because he's familiar with it.
Would that help you, Shirley?
Yeah, I think it's only
Yeah,
fair.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Matt. You want to start on that, John? Yeah.
So about 8 months ago,
Can you hear John all right, Shirley?
Shirley, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So about
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
So about 8 months ago, we received a grant Matt applied for this pavement study. We had to add a little bit of Chapter 90 money. So we had Stan Tech come in and evaluate all our roads and sidewalks in the town. The total cost was, I think, $47,000. So they went street by street, sidewalk by sidewalk, and they gave us a very detailed plan. We presented to the selectmen a couple of months ago. The town roads are in dire need of repair. We scored very low numbers on the scale that they use. If we were to fix every road in Douglas today, we would need $16 or $17 million, which we know that's not going to happen. But we want to come up with some type of a plan so we can at least start the process, and start bettering all the roads for everyone to use. So they gave us different scenarios in this plan, dollar figures if we broke it down in 10 years, where our number would be as far as, on their study. We're less than fair condition on the roads, which, that's what they are,
Right.
So our funding's been state aid only at around $360,000 a year, and we spent a lot of that money in the past years on bridges. So, and this year including for Cedar Street.
Right.
So this year coming, we're finally seeing our way clear where the bridges will be fixed. We can take our Chapter 90 money and start fixing roads, but at $16 or $17 million, $360,000 isn't going to put much of a dent in it. So, the talk is with the Board of Selectmen the night we presented, and with Matt and Bill Cundiff, we got to come up with some type of a plan to try to get our roads back to somewhat decent shape. So, and that's all in this plan.
Yep. Yeah, I would think that's probably gonna start from the center of town and work outwards.
Well, what they did is worst to first on the roads, you know, but you can choose how you want to do it. But to us, it makes more sense, the highly traveled roads, the main roads that are in poor shape, for instance, North Street, from Main Street down to the bridge,
Correct.
you know, some of Davis Street, Upper North Street, the highly traveled roads, and then pick away at the other stuff as well, you know, so. I mean, we have ultimate say.
Yeah, because we have some pretty heavy truck traffic.
We do.
As of late, come through, so
We
the,
were lucky, the state did Webster Street over
right,
a few years ago, which is over 4 miles of roads, which that road's in tip-top shape.
yeah, because we own from the line all the way through up to 146, right? Basically,
On.
from town line to town line on 16?
The only state road in town is from Manchog Road at the ball field to the Manchog line. That's the only road that the state owns right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're responsible for all the 16
That's
within
correct.
our. Correct.
Back in the day, there was a short section of Davis Street the state maintained.
Yeah,
But when they redid the school and the water line, they gifted it to us.
So with your introduction from John, I'm just going to draw your attention to a couple of important slides. And the reason why we're going over this is there's only so much resource to go around. So one of the constraints on the capital budget is how much of a balance do you need to strike between a roadway improvement program and your capital improvement program. My point of view is that roads are capital,
right.
one of the biggest assets owned by the town. But I think this is one of the most important slides. Surely it's a graph with no numbers on it, but it has nice rainbow colors. It's about, they didn't number their,
I did see that presentation, by the way,
okay. So this is page 4.
when he was doing it. I did see it.
At the selectmen's meeting a couple months ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I forget. October, maybe? September, October?
Yeah, September.
Yeah.
So this is a good chart because it illustrates that the decline of a road is not a straight line. It's not a 20-year road and it declines 1/20th every year. It isn't how it works. It starts off and it stays in really good shape for quite a while, and then when it starts to get water penetrations and other issues, it deteriorates rapidly, to the point where this red phase down here at the bottom of the chart, once you reach that, you have to completely rebuild the road. So, I don't know if John hinted at this because I was sending Shirley the email, but there is a counterintuitive but very important recommendation that comes out of pavement management. By the way, this study was grant funded. The taxpayer of the town didn't pay for this. This was
Yeah,
a
John
community
explained that.
compact. You first intervene with your best roads because you quote-unquote stop the bleeding with a patient. Well, you don't want your roads to deteriorate as a group. So you can crack seal and do some of the minor repairs cheaply, and you should do those things right away and just seal them up so that you can then turn your attention to the more difficult challenges. And the next several slides, I won't belabor this presentation, but it goes to, they're giving you a visual match to a score.
Yeah.
So a couple of slides in, you'll see they scored this road a 60. This is Locust Street from you to Southeast Main. That's 60 out of 100. And you see there's a lot of crack sealing on the road. There's some alligator cracks, so you get lots and lots of crack sealing in a couple of places. That's indicative of extensive water penetration or pushing from below, and the pavement
Yeah.
keeps heaving and sagging and forms cracks. Once you start to get down to the 11, the score of 11, that's Fairbanks Court from Linden to the dead end. We got a few streets like this. I mean, Cemetery probably meets this definition. But that's where you got to just completely start all over. You got to dig up all that mess and start with a new base. And that's the expense you want to avoid, because that on a running foot basis is very expensive. some of these comparatives don't really help. This was a very important chart for them to get us to talk about, and it's titled Current Town Roadway Conditions. And it's showing you that big orange bar is where you're going to fall off the cliff if all those roads fell to the red level, is where you would have a massive increase in the costs of addressing your roadway system. The next slide after that ties numbers to these bars. So it takes very little money to do the routine maintenance and keep those roads in good shape. So those were from a 68 up to 100 in the scoring system. The total necessary effort there is $244,000, 511. So based on what John just told you, that fits within 1 year of Chapter 90. That's work that really
Right.
should be done. But then,
You can knock 50,000 off, because that's what I did this fall,
Yep.
off of that number already. We did some of that preventive maintenance.
you probably saw them on Main Street doing crack sealing.
What I just thumbed through these quickly, they didn't make like a map of the town to show where these,
They did. So
they did.
this is a
Okay.
presentation. The
Yep.
more extensive report
Yep.
gives you all the detail. I didn't want to,
no, that's fine, I was just curious. It's just,
It's
it
all
was
done.
more for John's benefit, that's why I even asked the question.
It's on my website, at the Highway Department's
Yeah.
website, the whole report.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to see it with.
But it'll show like the red lines.
Correct.
As to where the real bad roads are.
It shows you
Yeah.
what each road
Yeah.
is broken down in a chart as well.
Yeah.
so they get into more detail a little bit deeper in. There's a very complicated chart here with a yellow upward pointing arrow that says desired trend. And they've highlighted 2 orange bars and 2 purple bars to indicate the most important targets. To prevent certain roads from slipping to lower categories, you would intervene with those target areas as your next priority after the routine maintenance. After that, they get into scenarios, and I think that's where it gets a little bit sobering, because just to keep your existing roads at their existing condition over the course of the next, they ran it out 10 years to fiscal 2031, you'd still have to spend $1.26 million a year just to keep your town-wide score at the same level. Individual roads may get better or worse, but your town-wide score would stay the same. And that conversation made quite an impression on everybody who heard it. I know the Board of Selectmen certainly reacted to it. Roadways over a long period of time create a significant impression on the taxpayer as to whether or not their dollars are going anywhere useful to them, because they drive around town and they rattle around and they knock their front end out of line, or they get knocked to the side of a road in a heavy rainstorm. They don't see it coming in the middle of the winter because it's full of snow, but it's very soft, and they just the overall impression of the town goes down. On the physical side, on the human asset side, probably the schools have the biggest impression. But certainly when it comes to the one asset that everybody in town definitely uses, it's the roadway in front of their street, in front of their house, the street that they take to get back and forth, to run their errands and do their business. So that is in the backdrop of the rest of the conversation.
Can I just ask you a question about this before you
Sure.
move on to the other stuff? On that graph with the average PCI projections, it says front-loading funding 22.4. Is that if you did a majority of the project up front?
Let me get to the scenario so I know I'm responding to the correct one.
Just so I can understand what the different this graph is for? Is this different?
All right, so I'll go through them all. The orange line, which is terrible, is
Yep.
the don't do anything at all.
Yeah,
The red line is your historical budget, which so only use Chapter 90. Using a worst to first approach. Then your historical budget on the pavement management system. Okay? So pavement management is taking care of the low-hanging fruit
Yep.
first and
Right.
then going to
Yep.
it. Worst to first is actually, over the long period of time, actually much more expensive than doing pavement management. The blue line is equilibrium funding, so that's keep your score at the same as it is today. Improve your PCI, so you're going to try to get to, there's another slide right before this one. You're trying to get your PCI from, what are we at, 56 to 54 to 68. So that's, you gotta look at the two slides together. Yeah, to go from a 56 to a 68 would cost you 1.7 million a year. Front-load funding, that is basically a bond.
okay.
So use the proceeds of a bond to do all the work in 5 fiscal years, and then maintain after that.
Thank you.
And I think did they peg that roadway bond? Was it 17 million?
Yes. 16 and change.
Sorry, 22.4.
And that included doing sidewalks as well.
Okay.
As most people know, the sidewalks, especially downtown, are very poor condition.
So that is part of the capital landscape. The rest is, I apologize for the small font, but again, I didn't want to bomb you with a 10-page document. This is a page and a half. What this represents, Mr. Chairman, is the fiscal '21 requests that were submitted to the Capital Committee just before COVID kept us from having any meetings. Rather than have everybody refile again, I just took those and slid their timeframes up 1 year because we didn't do capital in this most recent fiscal year. And the current year is taken up with the public safety radio project. So we're looking at fiscal '22, and these are organized by department in no particular order except for their priority, that they were assigned by the submitter, which in most cases was a department head. Now, I don't want to spend too much time going through each and every line because there's not been a lot of motion from the last time that the Capital Committee ranked different proposals or notions. There hasn't been a lot of new things added. I think probably John added the most because he started putting pavement and sidewalk projects into his request. So his request will reflect some allocation of funds, town funds, to supplement Chapter 90 funds. And I think what we'll realize as we go through this and we start to refine this, Mr. Chairman, is that we can start striking things off this list. Frankly, the schools will have to start over and do this again, because I think between just the necessity of having to buy certain things for remote learning and the things that I would certainly recommend that you knock off, we got to be able to treat certain things as operational expenses. And to the point where, I mean, Gene and I are in full agreement. A police cruiser is an operational expense. You don't have a police force if you don't have cars. The cars are not that expensive. They tend to wear out very quickly. So we don't treat them as capital. We treat them as an operational expense. You could go as far as to say that's probably true of ambulances as well, because they just don't last that long. So when I look at the school's request here, and this is old information, and I have no doubt that if they had this today, they would be striking a lot of this off themselves. But when it comes to painting the gym or getting the bleachers fixed or buying Chromebooks for the kids, those are part of the job. That's part of the absolutely essential resources or small, it'd be a lot for me to spend 14 grand to repair bleachers, but I don't have bleachers in my house. I'm not a school department.
Yeah.
Their buildings,
is that
frankly, are in good shape, and, they just need to be taken care of.
Is that something that they traditionally have into their budget for maintenance, such as that?
I'd have to look at Gene.
I think they do some things within their budget, but I would suggest that you reach out to the school department and, Matt and I have this discussion all the time.
Yeah.
I think there's a middle ground here. There's regular maintenance, there's extraordinary maintenance, and there's capital.
Correct.
And if you don't take care of it, it becomes like the roads, it becomes
Yeah.
capital. So I think you need that middle ground met for the things other than fixing the sinks and the toilets, which is what we see on the warrants. We don't see the painting.
Right.
They typically use some time in the summer when the custodians are, less active, not as busy, but they've got, on that front, you talk with Jeff, I mean, we just lost another custodian. I mean, they're just, like they're having trouble replacing those positions, especially in the COVID world. And I think, since March, they've been focused on just the COVID stuff. So I haven't seen any invoices for paint or stuff like that, where they use the labor from the custodians and they buy the materials themselves.
But nobody's been in school, so there's no wear and tear.
I'm sorry?
Nobody's been in school, so you have no wear and tear.
But I also think there are some things on here from the school perspective that they may have already done.
Yeah, some of the equipment.
The softball infield repair, for instance, they took care of that, right, John? Yeah. So the things that jump out at me for the schools, just because it has more than a little bit of significance, it's not just their internal operations, it affects their security and other considerations. I know that high school phone system really needs to be addressed. And that's probably not fair to ask them to bear the entire expense of that. There is one item on here, and I believe it is appropriate. The primary school is the oldest building up there, and the business manager has suggested that the repair, the total that needs to be done to upgrade the building or to sustain the building qualifies the project for DESI support under their school improvement program. So that would have to be bonded out or excluded somehow.
Yeah, that would be debt excluded.
So it would be a debt exclusion, and there would be partnership money coming from the state. And I think the town side is 700,000, but the actual cost of everything is more.
We'd have to apply, and it depends on the percentage.
Right.
reimbursed. It's similar to how we did the middle school. We did Brandon Elementary, but we did extraordinary maintenance on the
Yeah.
middle school.
I know there were a couple of items on the primary school major renovation that we took care of with Green Communities. So we fully upgraded all the lighting in the building to LED fixtures and LED bulbs. That was one of the items, but that's not much of the 700 grand. It was like 50 some odd $1,000, and it was all taken care of with grant money. So I think I'll give it back to you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, that's all I wanted to say about this. I think what we do is we look at this list and say, this is a starting point. It's not even ready to be ranked and scored yet, because you have to decide a couple of things as a committee. How do you want to look at things? You want to look at things as discrete projects? Do you want to look as a building as a building? You want to see who really, it's the buildings that probably jump out at me. I mean, it's $2.29 million that Adam has identified, and I don't even know that he's even asked for everything he knows needs to be done. I think he's asking for the most important stuff. And it's big items. It's roofs and windows and HVAC, and I would hate to go in, for instance, do all the windows at the post office, but neglect to approve the money for painting.
Correct.
So you have new windows, but you didn't paint. You got new windows, but you got the old HVAC. If you did it all at once, you'd actually might get
Some return.
some return on it. So I don't know how you want to proceed with it. To date, we've tried to break things into digestible pieces with hopes that
Right. And
they would be scored separately and be taken in order of priority.
Yep. And everybody on the committee has their own opinion. I just want to offer my thoughts. Is we have this list that we move forward just to get through our fall town meeting, so now we're trying to get back into a regular process in getting this done. So we have these things that are on the list. The roof that's on this particular building, it leaks. Adam has it patched twice a year. It's something that we should consider as a committee to get corrected. There's some sort of long-term plan for this building to get it fully utilized instead of just using 50% of the building, or 60%, whatever the ratio is. I would think that we should consider what's high priority as far as, I'm going to just use the roof for argument's sake, just use that one. If it's leaking and it's causing problems, it's pretty much a priority to stay on the list. The other things that, we have this big spreadsheet, but I keep looking back to this little short list that we have, that we move forward on the capital item list. If these are still high priorities that are on there, then we should look at those, and if not, then we move them to a different year, if they can be moved to a different year, and try to prioritize what has to be done now. So, and I'm going to keep using that roof because that's an easy one to pick on. If it's leaking, it needs to be fixed. It's only a matter of time before you can't keep patching it. You and I had a discussion about that, Matt. The roof is, what, about 25 years old?
Yeah, I think that's what Adam said. It's 24, 25 years old.
Yep.
And it was a 15-year membrane.
Right, and back 25 years ago, because I've been in this business for a long time, they were rated at 10-year roofs, and in some cases, you could get a 20-year warranty out of it, so they did something to give you a 15-year roof. Bottom line is we're probably 100% over the life of the roof, so it's something that should be addressed.
Mike and Matt, I think it was you, Matt, that had mentioned the way we had done, looked at stuff. We have a year's worth of stuff, and then we try to use it all up, the money that we had that came from free cash or whatever. And that's how we rated all of this stuff initially. But then you had suggested that perhaps we shouldn't do it that way. That, you know, by having a big master list like this, then we can look more closely. So we don't use up all the money just to use it up, but we look at what is
Yep.
needed most.
No, and that's valid, and I'm not even thinking of it in the terms of what to use up, is try to identify what is urgent for us to do. We have a big list, and everybody's personal opinion, theirs is at the top of the list.
Right.
But from a practical standpoint, if you, and I'll use it again, if the roof is leaking, you really should fix it, because it's only going to be a problem. You can't move forward to do anything with the HVAC replacement up there. You can't put the fire alarm system up there, the water suppression. You can't move up there. You can't use it. You can't do anything with it. Even if you weren't moving in that direction, you can't have the roof leaking. So, everybody has, again, we're a group, so everybody's entitled to their opinion and thoughts, and that's what we're trying to put together and try to make a common thought process out of it. But I think we need to look at what is really urgent. and go from there. So I don't know if we should be starting with this short list that we have with 5 items on it that we had moved forward, and see if those are still, at some point, they ranked very high to get at the top of the list.
Yeah, I'm just looking
And-
at the warrant that
Yeah.
came out. And,
The plan.
So there's nothing here that's five items except for 2024. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, and what I'm talking about is this capital list that we had up to that point. So I don't know if I have the warrant with me, I can look at it.
But
What is on there for the first, for the next fiscal year?
well, the
That we slid
radio
forward.
system
The radio system, well, that's already been,
That's
and
this
the-
year.
And the senior center for
that's this year, that's already been voted on and approved, so what's the following year?
lease replacement fingerprint machine,
Okay,
former town hall interior and exterior painting. So that's the post office.
yeah,
Municipal center roof and rooftop HVAC replacement.
okay,
Town clerk climate control for document storage area. Library interior renovations. Water department North Street main upgrade.
that's all on the very next year?
Yeah. Police department drone. Highway main, street sidewalks. And the last thing is school department tractor and attachments, which all adds up to $1,039,000. And this is what was presented, even, and I remember saying in our last meeting, that I was in favor of all of this stuff back in the day, and still not.
Okay. And that's why we're here now, to review this and get, we're obligated to come up with a 5-year plan to go on to the town meeting report. Okay, so that is on there. But now we're starting again to revisit it as is done each year, and prioritize what's going to be done. So we're trying to get prepared for the Springtown
Mr.
meeting.
Chairman?
Yes,
Shirley, Mr. Chairman?
yes, Shirley?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I can.
All right. At the the last town meeting in, September, we presented the capital plan, and it was voted on, even though it was approved, even though the FinCom was split 3-3. And I feel, and probably this follows as to what you were saying, although it's difficult to hear because there's some background noise. My feeling is, and I have said this to Matt before, in all fairness to the people who voted for our capital plan, we need to have a meeting after we have the information from the people who submitted their request for 2022. Asking them, is these items still at the top of your list? Is there something more that has taken a priority? And let's get a feeling from them, information from them. Because and I've said this to Matt, and probably to this committee before, things do come up that are more important that have to be done before whatever they've got on the list. So my feeling is, in all fairness to the people who voted for our capital plan, this is what we need to do. And if there's some items that are needed more, then the departments need to tell us.
Yeah, absolutely, Shirley. We're all in agreement with that, and you just summarized the short version of what our conversation was evolving into. And that's what I was starting to talk to Ellie about. is we have a list that was put onto the town warrant that was voted on, but again, we're revisiting it as is done each year to find out if those items are still a strong priority or if something more urgent has arisen.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm all in for that.
Okay.
So have the departments got a notice that they need to review
Matt
their request?
Matt has sent out an email to them requesting them to revisit their requests. And then, once he receives their feedback, then he's going to report back to us or forward it to us.
Okay.
John has a question.
So
Go ahead, Shirley.
do we have a deadline as to when they need to have that back to Matt?
We haven't even got into that discussion yet, but I can ask Matt that question. Well, he hears you, so he can answer that question himself.
It shouldn't take long at all. I mean, I guess what I'm hoping for from today's conversation is some, let's call it non-binding or vague guidance from the committee on how you want to approach the overall list. I understand, I think we all understand the dynamics. Some things will drop off, some things will come on. A lot of this stuff is now 9 or 10 months old. Does the department head still feel the same way? All of those things need to be changed or addressed. And then we can look for efficiencies. I mean, and that's part of what I've started. I mean, I have an update from the police department. The 2 items that they requested that were on the 5-year plan that was approved by town meeting a couple weeks ago, the fingerprint machine and the drone, those things can wait. So, because the fingerprint machine, we were able to get supplies for it and extend its life. The drone takes second place to their sidearm replacement because it's almost the whole year has gone by, and they had hoped to do sidearms this year anyway, but they didn't factor in a lost year. So that's what comes due, and that's just essential. So we're going to go through all these tweakings a week, 2. I mean, I think if you want my recommendation, this committee should meet again before the winter holiday and refine this list down to what the actual requests are going to be. But I'm going back to that prior point. If there's a sense that some things go together as a project. So we would not really do the roof of this building without removing the old, there's 4 big chillers up there, and replacing them with a more efficient system. And we have Green Communities money that we've already won, the grant, to weatherize the roof of this building. So they're gonna, when those apertures, when those perforations are opened up, they're gonna pay for us to close them. But now you gotta put a roof over that. So it's all gonna be staged in a way that makes sense. But that's a big expense. That will be 60% of your budget. And it's a big decision, and I just want to be sure that's the direction the committee wants to explore. You don't have to decide it, but is that what you want to explore? Because until we think of it that way, we don't get good cost estimates.
Correct.
Because we look at these things as one-off projects. How much would it cost to close the perforations? How much will it cost to take the units off the roof? As separate items. Sometimes they cost less if they're all done at the same time than they would if they were done at 3 different intervals. So I just want to make sure, because as we refine the conversation about how much money there is and how you want to spend it, if you want to spend it, I would rather deal with real numbers than just adding things up because it's convenient to add things up.
Right, but for us to meet in, say, in 2 weeks and try to make that decision, I don't think that would be possible, because it's going to be up to the department heads to be really realistic with us to give us what is it really a high priority and a valid reason as to why that is a high priority. So we'll use Adam because of the roof. he has to explain to us why that needs to be pushed up to the top, because these are all requests that you sent over.
Well, the other thing I want to suggest, Mr. Chairman, if I could, is I think there are some things that members of the committee need to see firsthand.
Yep.
I don't want to drag you around to a dog and pony show,
No?
but it may have been a very long while since anybody's been on the second floor of the old post office building.
Right.
It may be a while since anybody's been on the second floor of this building to see what's going on up there. I mean, that, for all intents and purposes, this building has 4 major uses.
Yeah.
Actually, if you add the EOC, 5, but we have our day-to-day staff here on the first floor. We have the police department with a full-blown police station. That's actually use number 1. Town hall, use number 2. We have so much paperwork stored upstairs, and I think it's all been culled pretty aggressively. What we have to have by law for document retention. So of the 4 or 5 classrooms upstairs, 3 of them are full to the gills with filing cabinets that are full of necessary material. If they get wet or destroyed, they're gone forever. And the last use would be this very small space here is one of the most important spaces in town. I'm pointing to the old stage that's been closed in behind me, because that's where our server is, where all of our IT. And because we are so closely nested with the police department, we share information technology assets with them because it makes sense to do that. But those are the 4 principal uses of this building, so it is not just town hall, the place where you come get a dog license.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here, and it all requires space.
To utilize the second floor, and a little off track, but you brought up a point. With all that document storage up in 3, there's 4 classrooms up there total, so we're using 75% of the space for document storage. What would we do with that stuff to expand up into the second floor with personnel?
I used to be a records manager at one point. I was a librarian most of my life, but a records manager for a nuclear power plant right after 3 Mile Island happened. I was in charge of microfilming all these documents so that they would be available in a crisis if it ever happened again. That's what you could do with this. You could microfilm it all. And I think
Yeah.
you're done then. You know,
Yep.
you've preserved it. We used to have an off-site place, which was Iron Mountain in New York State.
Yep.
And we have an on-site area as well.
So are we required to have the physical document?
No. Not if nuclear power plants are.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Town
ask.
of Douglas is
yeah.
either, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a very short list of things that you have to have the original, but it's
Okay.
super mega important documents that are fundamental to the town. Other things, Chris is the expert on this, and I don't want to volunteer her answer.
Right. And it's a little off
Unfortunately, I
topic.
think- yeah.
It was a reactionary thing to something you said.
Access
all
to
the
public
time.
records law is actually really outdated and arcane. I think they insist that we keep physical copies of some financial documents. We have to have the originals.
Payroll we have,
Payroll,
yeah. And payroll you have to have years, because employees want to buy back their time, and, you know, there were some years that we've had a gap because they got destroyed, and we're having trouble with Worcester Regional, you know, we're using town reports to try to fill in the blanks, we can at least give what they had the year along with the compensation schedule, so, you know, payroll, I keep all the financial records, I don't destroy that. That takes up most of our space for,
Right.
you know, the finance department's office. The assessors has a lot of their, you know, you go down the hall, you see file cabinets in the hallways too.
But,
It's not just in the rooms themselves.
right, and in the rooms themselves, we have safes that were moved in. When you move your town hall into this building, and they're full of precious things,
They have vital
you know,
records.
vital records and
And
Yeah.
ancient documents. That's what I think.
Which reaffirms the importance of having the roof to stop leaking, if we have that much stuff stored up there.
Like for film.
I still think that's going to be, either that or scanning is definitely part of the solution. But that's, we can get senior work-off people to do so much of it. And we can tax our leases on our scanners, copiers, to a certain point within our lease terms. But once you get beyond that, you start talking about a service that's not cheap. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Yep,
but
all right,
these are
so
good
plan of attack,
conversations, 'cause
I guess, would be to get our updated list from your department heads.
Yep.
And again, I don't think that we could make a decision at the very next meeting if you brought in that information. But we should have a strong, high priority list from each department instead of just a general list.
I think there are some conversations, Mr. Chairman, that are better if they happen on the record in front of you,
Yep.
rather than me
No, that's fine.
talking. So I look at the fire department in the way the chief time has slipped on him, so he's trying to make up for some time, but he's got replacing engine 1 and engine 2 in the same year.
Right.
That just, I'm sorry, but I don't think that can
I
happen.
don't think that's going to happen.
So we'll have to have that conversation with the chief on the record, he is a member of the committee, to really go through his total fleet management and his replacement schedule and get to a comfort level on what needs to go. I think engine 1 is not long for this world. I'm looking at the deputy chief for guidance. Right? I mean, that,
It's a great truck, it's a 99, and it's a 99.
it's a 99 at the end of the day. It's been such a good truck, we can probably hold it in reserve, but you just don't have a lot of place to park things. But because they're expensive, you don't want them to fail all at the same time either. You got to make sure.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with what you guys are saying. Get in touch with the department heads, ask them what's a priority, because year to year it can change for some. And I'll tell you, the stuff on my list, the pricing has changed, so you're going to want the updated pricing as well. Because these prices we got a year ago.
Yeah.
So I know for a fact, I've already started reaching out to my vendors to get me updated pricing. So I think your dollar amounts will change as well.
You think the
I
truck?
agree, John.
You think your big trucks are getting more expensive?
A little bit, yeah.
But at least this is the latest and greatest, so you can at least orient yourself to what people were thinking not that long ago, and then we'll refine it.
I'll speak for the highway, it's not going to change very much, to be honest with you, other than the pricing.
I don't know, I'll look at Ellie for the trustees. I mean, I think this project is one that got funded at town meeting.
Well, it's weird, because
Yeah,
over here it's 14,000, and then on this list that just the report was approved, no money, it says 25,000.
Yeah,
So I don't know the difference there. I don't know what's going on.
We are fortunate to have a numbers expert in the room that could probably explain that.
Yeah, but again, this 14 was old, and I think that was just your electrical code problems.
And that got voted at the annual town meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did some repairs, yes, at the annual.
But I don't know what this 25,000 is for, or I can't remember. I probably do know what it's for, but I can't remember it.
All right, so we've
Okay.
got some work to do, but I think you have a
Yep.
sense of what is on the list.
Right, and
By way of update, I think was the last thing we wanted to talk about, was where do we stand with the projects that have already been approved, and the major update is on the public safety radio. We have an internal team designated to converse with the contractor Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And I've got all of the emergency operations guys, our IT folks, involved. on our side. And so our internal conversation is going to be whether or not we want performance measures in the contract, or do we want a performance bond. But we certainly want to protect the town and get the performance that we expect, and establish that up front before we spend a single dime with them. The other issue that we have to work out is that the system is reliant upon fiber connections, fiber being, glass, as opposed to copper, from the Douglas Fire Station to this building, the municipal center, and from the municipal center to the school campus. So that is essential traffic needs to be carried, because it's going to be rebroadcast at the terminus of that in order to simulcast. So the furthest point east that will be on microwave will be the Douglas Fire Station. And then the third transmitter that's going to be that structure on top of the high school is actually going to be rebroadcasting signal from fiber. So I'm going to use the wrong terminology. I'm not a radio guy, but basically what's being broadcast from the tower at the fire department is going to be repeated, if you will, or simulcast on the pole that's going to be at the high school. And in order to accomplish that connection, there is no line of sight for microwave. It has to be done with fiber. Now, the fiber exists. It's already hanging on the poles as you drive down Main Street. You can see it. And as you drive up to the schools, you can see it. The question is, how much of that do we have access to, and how much capacity is open for us to use? We originally had a fiber account with Spectrum. And this is a very long, complicated story. I don't want to hurt anybody's ears, but the IT network in this town 3 years ago was a really sloppy mess. I know I'll offend anybody who might be listening who was involved with it, but unfortunately it was a sloppy mess. And basically a lot had been outsourced to Spectrum, and the town was paying a substantial sum of money every year for services that we weren't even using. And Spectrum owned the equipment and gave us this low-grade fiber account at a high price to move our data back and forth between the fire station and here, and from here to the schools. When we changed the network and we took control of our own network, so we basically fired Spectrum, bought our own equipment because it was that much cheaper than paying for their subscription service. We did away with all the services we don't need, and we put our traffic on a modern, high-grade copper line that also runs to all those locations, because it was much less expensive and just as fast, because it was pretty much hours. To move that back up to fiber, because the radio guys will not work with copper at all. It's just too much. It's too rich, too much data. It has to be on fiber, so we're going to have to go back to Spectrum and ask them to go back on, but a different kind of account. Now, I'm hoping that when we're going to play the public safety card and say, we're not paying a lot for this because this is a core service you should be providing us. We'll see. Yep. The problem is they're a monopoly, so you can only play so many cards with a monopoly and hope to win, but I think that out of the goodness of their business sense, they ought to figure out what we're trying to do and work with us on it. So that's the major issue, because we have to make sure that that third location is going to be operational, because that was essential to the discussion of the project. We know the capacity is there, so the question really is going to be about a negotiation over price. We did get a little bit of good news on the project. A fire department in our region has good quality radios that they've donated to some of the smaller towns, so we should be able to knock off, we're hoping to knock off some of the portable radios from our project, because we have access to, I think, is it 10?
I think
14 from the town of Auburn. So
At $1,100 a piece.
at $1,100 a piece, it's pretty nice, and that might actually help us in the conversation about the fiber. It might all wash out, but that's still good news whenever somebody throws assets our way. That's all I've got. We haven't done anything on the senior center floors yet.
No, I had seen Patrice, and she said that she was applying for a grant to see if something comes through on that.
Yeah, so her ADA grant is pending, so we'll see if those monies come through. We should hear soon, I think, on that one.
Anybody have anything else? Shirley, do you have anything to add?
No, just, we need to move forward and get this done before the next annual town meeting, because that's when it should be on the town meeting.
That's our goal.
All right, so, but sometimes, even before, we weren't able to get all the information, so it needs to be pressed that it is imperative we get the requests, or if there's changes, we need some kind of statement from the different departments, and soon. And then, Mike, are you going to set up a tentative meeting, or where are we?
Yeah, well, that was going to be my final question.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, actually, Ellie has a few questions for us, Shirley.
Sure.
Well, just,
We're talking about the paving.
yeah, the three things. I noticed that the Hoovertown Road, the Northwest Main Street, has back to its old 40 miles an hour speed limit. I'm wondering if this is because Mass Highway had done a free study 25 years ago or something like that, and they said, you, as long as you accept what we recommend, this is free. You can't go back on yourself. So is that why it's, I know the residents all are freaking out about the speed on that road, but that's what Mass Highway said?
I'm not sure if that's the answer. I know that one of your neighbors called, and the police chief has been interacting with that person. Maybe that word's getting out on his answer.
No, nobody told me personally. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, so we're looking into it. We're aware of that. I'm not sure what happened. I don't know if they came around and hung new signs, or...
Yeah, we did.
Well, we just replaced what was there. We've got a study from Mass DOT from, I want to say, the late 90s.
Yeah.
That we go off of. I have spoken with the police chief, and we're going to get together and maybe suggest a new speed study, because if you follow that road, it goes from 25 up to 40, back down, back up. But that's, when you call for a traffic study, you go with their recommendations. So that's what they recommended at the time.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a recommendation. It was, you have to accept this.
If you know that, you know more than I do about it.
Just because another town I was working for went through the same process,
Yep.
and they decided not to do it.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a comment on that?
Absolutely, Shirley.
And John, this entails you. How about a safety committee study, and maybe recommend the traffic control study?
Yeah, Nick and I are going to meet this week and talk about it, and we're going to speak with Matt about that. So that's in the works, Shirley.
Okay, because I know when I asked for a traffic study up here, and I think it was you and the chief and Bill Cundiff and whoever else, fire department chief, I think people were shocked at how fast the traffic is up here on this, way out road supposedly. But it is surprising, and I think we've got to involve the traffic study, because hey, who knows when the ambulance is going to be coming up, or going through, and that's an issue for people who think they can speed through Main Street and so forth, or wherever, because there's always something coming, and I've been downtown, and hey, the police can't be all over, but I've seen some of these hot rods go through on Main Street and, revving up their motors, and they think it's smart. But there are lots of things going on. So I hear you, Ellie, on your people talking. But if you could, I think it would be a good idea.
Okay, a couple of other things, and this is just what I've lived with in different towns over my life. And I grew up in the summers in Rockport, Massachusetts, and the road that we lived on was probably the worst we've ever seen. And the town would not fix it because then people would start speeding on it. It was a way to reduce the speed of the cars because there were cliffs that they could go over into the ocean. I don't know that anybody ever did. But I thought that was a nice way of looking at things. I know when you live in suburbia like here, you can't really do anything like that because people expect well-run roads or paved roads. We have our house up in Vermont, and I guess that there's very few paved roads up in Vermont, but they have a lot of snow, and they do fine grading them all the time and
Thanks,
putting
Ellie.
in. Well, I just, and there's some Tony houses up there too, and it's just all dirt roads. But, can't live with dirt roads, but they're.
Well, we could always do just right in front of your property, dirt.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, look at my driveway. I think it's only, I remember.
John's got this giant grader down there that he could probably come rip it up.
Yeah, I remember when Joel Rosencrantz moved in across the street, he tore up the driveway. He says, I want my driveway to look just like yours. And it works. But anyway, that's, it's the pressure you have from the community to
Oh,
keep
sure.
the roads the way
I mean, we
you
got one
do.
pothole and my phone's ringing off the hook, so,
Yeah.
or someone's looking for a claim for a pothole, because they blew a tire or something, so.
And I also remember going to Spags way back when, it must have been 30 or 40 years ago. And the back streets around Spags were awful. I mean, you could not crawl over them, basically, but they didn't want them paved. There were potholes enormous that went down and
If
crazy.
we do a survey, you'll know what everyone's gonna say.
Yeah, no, but you don't have to do a survey. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
there are other ways to look at things, that's all.
Of course.
Yeah. These are extreme ways of looking at things, but there are other ways. That's it.
That's it? You
Mr.
good?
Chairman,
Yes, Shirley?
I'm sorry. Ellie, I think you and I probably got off. This isn't really capital stuff, but unless we can tie it into the first part of the meeting when the road survey, so that's probably, otherwise unless it's going to cost money, I think we better be careful. We're not on capital.
Yeah, no, and it was my opportunity. I saw the stuff on TV too, of the meeting. I'm a devoted watcher of the selectmen's meetings on Tuesdays. So. And I couldn't.
So you're the one.
Yes. But I was surprised there wasn't a show on last night. It's tomorrow night, right?
Yeah, there was a little snafu with the agenda.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Administrator, what would you suggest your timeline may be to hear back from your department head so we can schedule the next meeting?
So Mike, where are we?
I was just asking Matt a question. So what I just asked him was, what would his guesstimation be to schedule our next meeting to give him ample time to get his information back from his department heads? So he was just pondering that question, and he's about to answer.
I still think you should meet in 2 weeks. The way that we push through this work is to schedule the meetings and
Nope, that's fine.
require the outputs, and we'll strain against
Yeah.
the wheel as much as we need to get them done. But backing up for a second, the budget process and the preparation for Springtown meeting really all should be wrapped up in February so that the FinCom can make final set of recommendations with time to deliberate. I don't really want to be laboring on the budget. There's always going to be numbers that are too big to ignore that don't come in until the end of March, and that's just a fact. but I'd like to have everything else done, including capital, so that we're not scrambling at the last minute
Correct.
to do the warrant and to do the flyer and all the rest of
Yep.
it. So if we can at least get to the point where we know what the list looks like as a final list of requests in 2 weeks from now, then you take a break for the holidays, come back in the middle of January, about a month after your next meeting, then you'd be in a position to make some decisions. And I think we'll have a clearer picture of what we think the budget, the capital budget would be. The one thing I feel pretty confident saying is I would be very surprised unless, the only fly in the ointment is if the federal government fails to do its job and pass some kind of secondary aid round for the COVID response. It doesn't have to go the whole year, but let's say we get some kind of bill done in December or early January. That's the only place where we could fall so short that we would need to have another town meeting, frankly, to cover holes in the budget. But other than that, I put it this way, I am very, very optimistic that we will have a respectable capital budget this year. We can get a few things done and still have free cash left to roll to the next year.
All right. So 2 weeks from today would be December 16th. Is everybody available at 2 PM on December 16th, 2 weeks from today?
Let me check my calendar.
Unless it snows.
John,
Hey, over there, you gotta be close enough to wood to knock.
I was glad that rain was not snow the other day.
Yes, this weekend too, another 2 or 3 inches.
That would have been a blizzard.
I'll just, I'm going up to Vermont that day, but.
You can Zoom in
Yeah.
or
and I'll
call in.
Try to do it by, try to get up there.
December 16th is good for me. 2
Okay.
o'clock?
Yes.
Is there-
I just like to stress the importance of everybody trying to make a good effort to attend this meeting somehow or another, because today we're a little close on whether or not we could even have it at the last minute. So we're missing 2 members. We really can't afford to have people not participate if they can't do it. We need to,
That and you have 2 vacancies,
and we have 2 vacancies.
so.
So if anybody's listening out there, call Matt.
Call Suzanne.
Suzanne. Okay, something else that I just want to quickly ask is a ways back during the negotiations with the Wallen Lake State Park, part of their entrance fees were earmarked towards public safety. I've asked Gene about it a couple times. Is that something we can pursue? Because that would help potentially fund some of those smaller items that the police department is looking for?
I did
Or-
put a call into Joe McKenna's office. Laurie is going to reach out and try to get a hold of someone from DCR.
Yep,
So I sent an email and I called.
yep.
So I'll keep kind of pushing her along.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it out into a formal conversation, so then if whoever can nudge them, maybe we can get some of that funding and help us for some of these smaller projects. Whatever's in, I have no idea what's in there, maybe it's a bigger project, who knows? But,
It's an okay sum, I think.
yeah,
Well, last we checked, it was 30-something thousand.
yeah. Well, that pays for a fingerprint machine. But,
Yeah.
anyways, just wanted to bring that up. Does anybody else have anything else that they like to bring up? Shirley?
Nope.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. We would need a roll call vote because Shirley is absent from the
Shirley
physical meeting.
Mazinski, aye.
Ellie Chesbro, aye.
John Furno, aye.
Ben Tessino, aye.
Mike Fitzpatrick, aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you.